I lost grip and the car just went sideways and started rolling over 4 and 5 times. I called my dad and I said,
hello and welcome back to another episode of The Apex, the weekly podcast and editorial by Custodian, which is the all-in-one platform to manage and protect your car. I'm Archie, and today I have the pleasure of welcoming Luna Bondesan. Luna is the marketing director for the Petersen Museum, which is literally the #1 automotive museum on the planet. She was born and raised in Italy and grew up in Italy's leading American car dealership, where her father introduced the country to Jeeps and their off-roading capabilities. Early on in Luna's career, her work as a journalist earned her recognition from the brand that she loves so much, and she went on to spearhead Jeep's marketing strategy. She's also worked with Luftgekuhlt, Porsche, Maserati and Petrolicious. Luna, thanks so much for joining me. How are you?
thank you. I'm great and very, very excited to be on the podcast. So thank you for inviting me and having me.
Thank you for taking the time. And I suppose I can just see out of the corner of the window the roof of the Petersen Museum, which is where you are. there it is. Yeah. How do you sort of describe what the Petersen Museum is for people who might not be fully aware of it or have heard of it before?
Absolutely. So the Petersen Museum, I like to define it as the epicenter of car culture, for sure in America and on the West Coast. Our museum has over 450 cars and 4 levels of exhibits that constantly rotate. We do make an effort to make the car world accessible to all levels of the passion. So from little kids all the way to the top collectors of the world, we'd like to be sort of like that mecca and that place where people can come and experience car passion in all forms, for sure. We have a permanent collection of vehicles that are either in the museum or they are traveling the world to different museums that we loan them to, or concourses, races, as well as special events. And then we have cars that are loaned by generous, collectors or just owners who sort of like contribute to make our exhibits possible. Because our exhibits rotate so much and they cover all sorts of different themes. We do have the need to source cars from different places of the world and different owners. So there's always a constant rotation. In fact, some days, I give tours to people occasionally when they come and visit or brands that we work with. And I'm like, okay. And then on this floor, you will see that there is this special car that I really love so much. And the car is not there anymore because every day they change. So there are no points of references, but it keeps the museum always fresh and new to visitors' eyes. So it's really, really entertaining.
And so what exhibitions have you got on at the moment? Is it right you're doing something with lowriders? Is that something that's quite prevalent at the moment?
Exactly. Yes. So this year is our 30th anniversary and we're celebrating it in many different ways. But Lowriders is our latest exhibit that just opened on May 11th. And it has over 35 vehicles between cars, motorcycles, bikes, and all sorts of little quirky things.
Yeah.
The lowrider culture is so amazing because it's not just car passion. It's definitely an art, as you can imagine, for how much love, attention, and dedication goes into the details of these cars. And the cars that we have on display are the best of the lowriding world. So multi-awarded cars that have won, several shows. We have Gypsy Rose, which is one of the most famous lowriders in the world. And when we did the exhibit opening, we had over 1,000 people coming to see this, and people were in tears because there is so much love and sense of family around the lowrider culture that putting the spotlight on this type of aspect of car culture it's not something that a lot of places have the opportunity to do. But for us being in LA, it's such a natural vehicle in a way to put them all together. and it's really an impressive exhibit. So we're very proud of it.
Yeah, and I think it's not just, sometimes when you think car museums, it's not just like a fact sheet or Wikipedia display of the cars. It's very much incorporating the culture of that community into the exhibition. And I suppose,
Exactly.
how do you really achieve that? I mean, what's the sort of...
By working a lot with the, I would say, relevant figures in that culture.
Okay.
In fact, because car knowledge is, we do have a lot of phenomenal curator and historians, but you always need to work with the representatives of that culture
Yeah.
in order to get the real sense of what that represents in the car world. So, for example, for Lowrider, we have a guest curator whose name is Denise Sandoval. She is a professor of Chicano culture at the university here in LA, and she is a phenomenal woman who knows a lot about lowrider culture and cars, and is very well connected to all of the people who kind of like represent that in and around LA. So she helped us connecting all of those dots between the cars, the people, and what the culture is.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, I was personally in charge of this video series that sort of highlights the main subjects of the exhibits and deep dives into their stories and why they started loving lowriders and how their passion sort of evolved together with the cars that they built and produced. And there's such objects of passion that put families together. It's really like heart filling to hear their stories. So those videos play within the exhibits so that people
Okay.
sort of like get a direct testimonial of who makes these exhibits possible. And that's sort of like how we create the full circle.
Yeah, it's not just the cars, it's like the people that are owning these cars and have sort of, brought that culture into fruition. You sort of get to see them as well, which is, I think,
Exactly.
a big part of it. And just to show the contrast.
I'm
Sorry,
so
yeah,
sorry.
no, go
I
on.
was gonna
Sorry.
No, it's something that is I have learned by working here is that, since the moment I started working here, I'm constantly overwhelmed by all these beautiful cars on display that all the space that you can dedicate to them is the parking spot and the placard where it says a little bit about the story of the car.
Yeah,
But by doing these, developing these content series and, getting to know the subjects better, it is incredible how the importance of that car gets amplified by 2000% the moment that you learn why that car exists, who built it, why do they own it, what does it mean to them. So the stories are definitely, and the people are definitely, take the pole position in the level of attention that that car deserves. So
yeah, no,
I'll
that
stop talking.
makes a lot of sense. And
I get too excited about
no,
these
no,
things, and then
I 100%, yeah.
it can go on for hours.
No, it's that's really special, and I suppose the contrast as well, because it didn't, that exhibit replace like the Tesla exhibit, which is it's got a completely different section of the car world. It's...
It did. It did indeed. And it's funny because Tesla has been one of our best performing exhibits ever. The amount of people who are actually, first of all, it was the first exhibit of its kind. Tesla never did something like this ever. So we were very blessed to be able to work with them in their design studio on the development of the Tesla exhibit concept. But Tesla draws a lot of different people that are not necessarily car people, but they're interested in the technology, in whatever Elon does, in a lot of different aspects, in the future, in the SpaceX component, in the boring tunnel component, and so on. So that was greatly performing with a very wide audience. And now, a bunch of people were like, "Oh, we're so happy that Tesla's gone, so we can go back and looking at real cars that are, are sort of like
Yeah,
not
yeah,
so technology filled." But the lowriders exhibit is performing incredibly so far, and it's definitely a complete shift. But this is what the Petersen does. It's like it's explore all aspects of car culture, and that's why it's important.
And are you sort of organizing events and workshops across Europe as well to sort of expand the reach of the museum?
Yes, exactly. So, while we definitely have a great visitor space that it's local, we are expanding internationally more and more. In fact, when we go visit other museums in the rest of the world, they hold us to like the gold standard of car museums. We are the biggest museum that has such a variety of cars, other than obviously the monobrand museums such as Porsche or Mercedes and so on. Um, but we are developing all these different programs, mostly through experiences so far, to get our people out of LA and let them explore car culture outside of LA through our connections, as well as familiarizing the Petersen brand with people who are not local to the US or the West Coast. So that's a big project that we started this year, and it's going great so far. So we're excited about it.
Yeah, and obviously, I mentioned in my intro that you were born and raised in Italy, but did your dad take you to the Petersen Museum when you were a kid? Is that kind of
He did actually. It's funny because my dad used to travel to the U.S. very often because his business was mainly to buy American cars and sell them in Italy where they weren't officially imported. So he would travel to the U.S. at least a couple of times a year to go on a car hunt and just fill containers and bring them back to Italy to then sell them there. And then the first stop of each of our trip for the car hunts was always the Petersen. So it's so funny for me. Like when I started working here, I was like, I've been here 1,000 times since I was a little kid to now that I'm 34. And even before this renovation, now the way it looks, it was made in 2014, and there went a major renovation. And before, it was definitely a different looking building. So I've seen it evolve over the decades, and it's quite mind blowing now for me to be working here. So
yeah. And going into your sort of childhood and your early years and your dad's influence, could you maybe just sort of describe a little bit about what your early years were like and growing up next to your dad's American car dealership and what that was like?
Definitely took a toll on my mental sanity. So I would start with that. But no, so as I was mentioning, he grew up being an unauthorized photographer at car races. So as when he was a little kid, he would climb on trees and take aerial photos of rally cars and then sell these pictures because he was so passionate about cars and he couldn't afford anything. He was from the countryside, like not a lot of opportunities back then. So that's how he started making his first money. And then he always wanted to be a racer. So he started with a little Jeep Willys that was left in Italy from the war, and he found it, restored it, and was driving my grandma crazy by like just running around with this Willys everywhere in the rice fields, pretty much. And then that whole thing evolved. He became a very talented racer, and because he had no fear of death whatsoever, he was winning all of the races that he was participating in. And then a lot of his competitors were driving Suzukis or Mitsus or Land Rovers and so on, but nobody had a Jeep because they didn't exist in Italy, at least.
Yeah.
So and they would go to him and they were like, okay, you're winning so much with this car, it must be the car. So I want one too. And that's how it started for him. So he started basically sourcing these cars and like traveling to the US to buy them, to sell them to his competitors. And that's how this whole thing started. And then he kept racing. And then I was born. He stopped racing because the business side of things then took all of his time, because he started with, buying 2-3 cars a year, and then they became 150 cars a month. So he definitely expanded with, the economy boom of the
Mm.
80s and the 90s. And then when I was born, I was always, kind of like submerged in that environment. And I really wanted him to teach me how to be part of this world, but he, maybe because he was protective, or maybe because he's a little bit, I would say, old fashioned in his mindset. He was like, "You're a girl, just stay out of it. Don't get involved in this." And that became a challenge for me to prove him wrong. So I became more and more passionate. Tell me that I can't do a thing, and that's the best way to get me to do it. So I I started like sneaking in the workshop and getting, stealing his cars, learning how to drive on my own, convincing my grandmother, being his mom, to teach me how to drive. And would go with a little Fiat 500 in these like tiny country roads, and just trying to. And she immediately taught me how to do the doppietta. I don't know what's it called, when you downshift and you hit the gas before downshifting.
Oh, like
What's it
rev
called in English?
matching.
Yes, thank you. That was like, in order to drive this car, you need to do that. And I was 9 years old, so I was like, this is amazing. And, and that's how it started as a little kid. Then I started racing myself with Jeeps and off-roads, because that was the only thing accessible to me. And my dad finally let me do that, without really teaching me anything, but allowed me to do that. And that became a passion, obsession, profession. And here I am,
Yeah.
almost, I would say, 25 years later, still completely sucked into this world. So
And when you were sort of, adventuring out on your own in the Jeeps and whatnot, I imagine it probably didn't always go to plan. Is that fair to say? Were there some little accidents along the way?
Oh God, yes, actually, I'm famous for being a great roller over of Jeeps. Definitely, because I had no direction. The first time I rolled over, I was 14. I was going very fast with this Wrangler TJ, and at some point, I didn't really realize that I didn't have as much grip as I did on the road. So I was driving it as you would drive on the road, which
Yeah.
is not advisable when you're off-roading. And I lost grip, and the car just went sideways and started rolling over 4 and 5 times. I called my dad and I said, okay, I'm alive, but you're never going to see me again, because I'm running away from home. I made a disaster. Goodbye. So, and that was such an unexpected reaction from him, because he's always been quite strict and, easily prone to anger. But that day he came on the scene and he saw the car was completely destroyed. He didn't hug me or was like, like, oh, I'm happy that you're alive. He was like, you can still come home. You're not kicked out. And I was like, how are you not like completely mad at me? And he said, because I have done this 1,500 times and I cannot expect the apple to fall too far from the tree. So you get a pass. That's fine. And that wasn't helpful, because then I did it again, like another 3 or 4 times so, during races and in way more extreme conditions. But now it's been a while that it hasn't happened. So I guess I have figured out the law of physics finally. And maybe
Yeah.
I am good now.
I
So
think
that was definitely.
Yeah, when you push the limits of the car and the limits of yourself, eventually you do find those limits. So sometimes they come up and surprise you a little bit. Yeah, no, definitely.
Exactly. No, that was another element that made me sort of like fortify my love for Jeeps, is that I always got out of it completely without any sort of damage, other than brain, I guess, which unofficially, but the fact that I never even had a bruise
Yeah.
out of like rolling over multiple times in all situations, on rocks, sands, in the water, upside down, sideways, backwards, from like the roll bars of Jeeps are incredible. So Land Rover, if you hear me, I've never rolled over in a Land Rover, but
I have.
I think,
It's probably not as good as a
but
Jeep.
I don't know that those roll bars can save lives like no other thing that I've ever
Yeah.
seen. So it's good that they have them. That's
Yeah, no,
all.
tipping over in a Land Rover is like being in a tin can. It's not
Yeah.
a fun experience at all. It's yeah, and especially when you're not driving either. It's not even your fault that it's
Oh
rolled.
my God. I can only imagine.
Yeah, no, I'm not a very good passenger actually. It's all right if you're
Yeah.
driving and it's your fault, but yeah, if someone else has done it, then it's worse, I think.
Exactly.
Yeah, and obviously, I just want to touch briefly on your sort of father's dealership as well, because he was literally like the first person in Italy to be selling American cars to Italy and I suppose Europe as well.
Yeah.
There must have been some sort of real demand there, obviously, because he was fulfilling it. But I imagine the sort of, I don't know, the clientele who was buying these cars. I would imagine that the Italians are quite, loyal to their own brands, but obviously there was a demand for it.
It's funny because they were seen as completely exotic products, right? So you always want what you can't have. And plus all the, American TV series that were imported in Italy, like Starsky and Hutch, Dukes of Hazzard, Baywatch, Beverly Hills 90210. It's like all these things contributed to sort of like promote and market those cars as something cool that Italy didn't have. So the clientele was very diverse, but it started with a lot of like pop stars, soccer players, actors and actresses, like all of the people who had the means to, or big garages, where they, obviously none of these were first cars for anybody. They were like the fun car for the weekend, or the Jeep to go on to the mountains and off-road adventures, or the Mustangs, the Camaros, the Corvettes, the Vipers, the trucks. And it's funny because people would buy Dodge Rams 1500 as a lifestyle show off item, like
Yeah.
if you say this to anybody here, they would be like, "What are you talking about? Are you insane?" Uh, but they were the coolest thing, and there was also a movement in Milano that contributed. It was literally a cultural movement of the Paninari, which basically that revolved around a group of cool people that were hanging out around this. Basically, it was called, I forget what it was called. It was called Il Burghi or something like that. It was like a cheeseburger place, a sandwich place that was unusual for Italy in the 80s because we don't have fast food and chains
Mm.
and stuff like that. So imagine like a non-chain McDonald's thing that was made cool, and all the cool people in Milano were hanging out there and made it a social destination. And all these people were wearing bomber jackets, like Levi's jeans and Converse. And then they all had Jeep CJ5s and CJ7s because that was part of the personality of like the American dreamer.
Right.
So all of those weird things sort of like connected in the 80s and the 90s and made his fortune with selling American cars.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I don't know if that explains it, but
Yeah, no, don't, yeah, no, that sort of puts it into I mean, it's making me think of Italy in the 80s, and I sometimes wish I had a time machine. Sounds like
yeah,
quite a
same,
cool
same.
period, yeah. And obviously, this influence that Jeeps have had on you in your early years. You then went on to actually work for Jeep. How did that come about?
That was an interesting development. So basically, after my racing endeavors and so on, I ended up in Milano, which was the nearest big town to where I grew up, and I started studying there. But I really wanted to be close and still exposed to cars, but not being around my hometown where the dealership was, I was like a little bit confused on how to still make it happen. In Milano being such a big city, it's like mostly public transportation, especially for a kid of
Yeah.
my age, that I was like 17 or 18 when I moved there. Um, and I stumbled upon this basically magazine, which was the Italian version of Autocar, which I'm explaining it to you like you don't know what it is, and it's like not a lot of people know what Autocar was in Italy, but it was literally the Italian edition of Autocar, and the editor in chief back then was like, what is a young girl doing around here? And I was like, I just love cars and I love writing and I love magazines and I'm all about this. And he's like, oh, why don't you try and write for us? And I said, because I'm a kid, I'm the only girl here, what are you talking about? He's like, no, just give it a try. So he gave me this like test article to write. I did it, and then the following day was like, you're hired, you work with us now. So I was like the youngest car journalist in Italy in 2000, I don't even know, 7. And that's how it started. So I wrote on car magazines for a few years, and they would fly me all over the world to test drive new cars, motorcycles, and write my driving impressions about them. And that sort of like accelerated my experience with a variety of different cars that weren't just American cars. But obviously, I still loved writing about Jeeps and off-roading, which was my most familiar topic. So my article some way reached people who worked at Fiat, and when Fiat acquired the Chrysler brands and with them Jeep, they reached out to me and said, we need an expert on these American brands because we have Fiat people, Alfa people, Maserati, Ferrari people, but not a lot of expertise on the American brands because who cares about them? So I was then hired by Fiat Chrysler as a consultant on the American brands for Italy, and then I ended up in the marketing department, and I was in charge of the marketing strategies for Jeep for Europe, Middle East, and Africa. And I had a great mentor there who sort of like taught me all of the corporate world rules, and I brought in the expertise. So that was a phenomenal experience that I did for about 4 years. And I was in charge of marketing strategies, development of concept cars for motor shows like Geneva, Frankfurt, Paris, and so on. And then one-offs and sort of like VIP cars with customizations and all sorts of fun things. So and I was 21 years old.
Oh, wow.
So that was
incredibly young to be doing. Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah.
But I was so passionate, and I was like, I didn't need to sleep. I didn't need to eat. I had I had all energy, and so I was, I don't know. It was my dream come true. Imagine, so.
Yeah, no, just completely obsessed. Jeep obsessed. Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. But I know you've worked with some other brands as well. I listed a few in the introduction, and one that I got quite excited about was Petrolicious when I saw that you'd produced the Homologation Specials series. Could you maybe just talk a little bit about what that was like and your experiences of producing those?
Yes. So after, I would say, what was it, like 10 years, about 10 years working for all different manufacturers in Italy, I decided that I wanted to experience what this whole part of the world was, which is where, my car passion started together with my dad on these trips on, looking for cars to bring back to Italy. And I gave myself a week to find a job in the US because I needed a work visa and all of that. And Petrolicious hired me as a marketing director for them. So I was so excited. I came here, and actually that's not true. I didn't come here yet. They said, okay, before you move to the US, we are launching this new series that's about homologation cars, and we want to shoot it in Europe, but we need to find people who own homologation cars and are willing to let us, drive them, shoot them. on, which is not a very easy task, because A, these cars are super rare.
Yeah.
B, the people who own them don't take them on the road. C, when they own them, they want to keep it to themselves. They don't want the rest of the world to see them. But luckily enough, thanks to my sort of experience and network of people that I developed through the years, so I was like, oh, I know this guy that has a CLK GTR. I know this guy who has a Renault 5 Turbo. I know this guy who has a Stratos. So that was like my first assignment when I started
Okay.
working at Petrolicious, and it couldn't have been an easier job for me, just because I knew the right people at the right time, and they were like, "Oh, sure, we'll give you the car, do whatever. Let us know when you're done."
Yeah.
So that was a very exciting thing that we did, and we shot it in less than 2 weeks with a pretty big variety of cars, but that was amazing.
With homologation cars, obviously, it's funny because it has kind of rally roots, which is kind of something that was quite prevalent in your childhood. Did you sort of feel that when you were working on these cars? Did it sort of remind you of those sort of earlier years and being around sort of the rally stages in Italy?
Some of them definitely, like the Renault 5 Turbo for sure. The other cars, like the CLK GTR, the 288 Ferrari, and the Stratos, it did. The Delta did, it did.
Yeah.
But then the homologation special spectrum goes from rally cars to like the 911
Yeah.
GT and
GT1.
so
Yeah.
on. Like those were definitely out of my league. But it was great too. My nanny used to drive a Renault 5 Turbo, so I definitely had a moment of great nostalgia
Yeah.
when we shot that episode. But
Yeah.
yes.
So talking of being behind the wheel, what is your sort of go-to at the moment? What do you drive around in? What's your sort of personal taste in cars now?
So, being an Italian redneck, I drive a Dodge Challenger Hellcat with about 800 horsepower, and it's the I don't even know why people are like, why don't you drive an, I don't know, 500 Abarth, or why don't you get a Ferrari or a Maserati? And I'm like, I don't like those cars very much, to be honest. So I am a muscle car girl. I can't help it. I am not ashamed of it. So that's what I drive nowadays.
Yeah.
And my dream car is a Ford GT. I have a Viper on the list. I have a GT40 in my dreams. That's going to be impossible, but unless it's a replica. I have a Cobra on my list. Definitely a replica. And then I always have a Jeep, which is something that it's like my little womb. I always need to have a Jeep in my garage,
Yeah.
just either daily or just to look at, because I'm loyal to the whole reason why all of this started. So
Yeah. Yeah, no, that makes complete sense. And I was going to sort of finish up by asking you some quick fire questions, but I wonder actually if in some ways you might have already answered them with that bit there. What would you say your favorite car in the Petersen Museum is?
well, definitely we have '05 Ford GT, which was the last car that Robert Petersen bought for the museum before passing.
Oh, wow.
So that is like one of our most significant cars because of the reason why it's there. And I got to drive it not long ago, and that car is sensational because it is so drivable. It's like a Ford F-150. It's the most reliable and robust car, but it is a supercar.
Yeah.
So it when you ask of it, it gives you a lot and lot more than what you can handle. But if you don't, it's the most like the best handling car ever. I don't know, at least for my taste.
Yeah.
So
What's your favorite driving road? I suppose, if you're in the GT40, what road are you driving it on?
I mean, on the GT40, I wouldn't drive it anywhere. I would just sit in it, sleep in it, and look at it. On a car that I am not afraid of ruining, I would say, oh God, there's so many. Well, in America, there is a couple. One is Highway 33, which is just north of LA, and Highway 229, which is basically a roller coaster for cars. It's not a long road, but it's a very intense road, and if you drive it fast, it's just the most exhilarating thing ever. While in Europe, I would say, because it's ultimately a road, the Nürburgring is
Okay, yeah.
my happy place.
Okay. How many times have you driven around the Nürburgring? Is that quite a frequent thing for you to do?
Yeah, it was, at least when I lived there. When I was living in Milano, in the last leg of my, you know, before I moved here,
Yeah.
I would pretty much every other weekend take my M3 and drive overnight on Fridays when I was done with work to the Nürburgring. It's like a 7-8 hours drive. Get there by Saturday morning, sleep 2 hours, and then just get as many laps as I possibly could over the weekend, and then drive back on Sunday night. So I can't count them, to be honest, but it was definitely a great weekend activity for me. It was my favorite thing in the world.
That's amazing. And final question: what's in your dream 3-car garage?
That's such a hard question. Allora, definitely the Ford GT. We've said
Yeah.
that. Then I feel like I need an Italian car, so it would either be a Bizzarrini
Mm-hmm.
5300 GT. I love that thing; it's so beautiful to me, and I need to put my Jeep Wrangler TJ, which is the one I rolled over with 1,000 times. It's so out of balance that I cannot put a hardtop on it because the car is crooked like that. So it needs to have a soft top. It doesn't, nothing fits anymore. The doors don't match, the hood is, even though like we've repaired it 1,000 times.
Yeah.
But that car means the world to me, and so that would be my 3 cars garage.
Yeah. I was expecting a Jeep in there, so no, that's good. Well, Luna, I know you're very busy, and it's been absolutely lovely to chat to you. So thank you so much for your time. Where can people sort of follow you or find out more about the Petersen Museum?
Yeah, so obviously our website, petersen.org, is where we publish all of our exhibits. We have a great archive of a lot of different, materials about all the cars that we have, not all of them, but solid amount. So the website, our Instagram, same thing, Petersen channel, and then my Instagram is Luna Bond, and that's all I've got. I'm not an influencer. I've got my 2,000 followers that are very that I bore with car content all day long. So
that's fantastic. And obviously, if you want to find out more about Custodian, you can do so at www.custodian.club. And thank you very much for listening. And I will see you in the next episode. Awesome. Thanks so much, Luna. Thank you.